Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Oh, Captain, my captain.
I'm telling you straight, it's my way or the highway.
Oh, command me, Lord. Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Tell me something, my friend. You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? I always ask that of all my prey. I just like the sound of it.
I'll have what she's having.
You have chosen wisely.
It reminds us of all that once was good. And it could be again.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious...
You're listening to the 30-something movie podcast. Classic movies, 30 years in the making. Welcome once again to the 30-something movie podcast. We are on episode number 250. I had to almost double check this as I'm saying this. 252. Now that we're past 250, it's like, I don't even know where we are anymore. It's kind of like when you're on summer vacation and you have no clue what day of the week it is. As you can hear from,
might be referring to.
Right. As you can hear from the background of the chorus of mm-hms that followed, I do have with me Bo Lovefest Warmbold. Bo, how you doing?
I'm well, yourself?
I'm doing pretty good.
Excellent.
And then I've also got Pat, the Master Canagalo.
Hey.
I don't know what you're the master of, but I just picked it up.
I don't know either, but it's summer vacation. We're relaxed. So I'm just keeping my mouth shut.
Master of relaxation.
There it is.
Okay, I'm stepping over that particular pitfall there.
There you go. All right. So tonight we are going to be talking about the movie Born on the 4th of July. You know, we're a little bit past 4th of July when this one will come out. Originally, before life got, in the way and some of the podcasts got delayed just a little bit. This one was really originally supposed to come out. I think I was going to put this one out on the day of 4th of July, because why not? That is the movie, the name of the movie. It was the day this was going to get published, but did not happen. So that's okay. But we're still in the month of July, so that's all right too. But this one's Born on the 4th of July, so we're going to get into that one here in just a little bit. But very, very quickly, our usual thing. This is a spoiler podcast, so as we talk about movies, we are going to spoil them. We don't really hold back in terms of plot details, things like that. So even if we're talking new movie news or we happen to mention something, the only thing we're not going to spoil is Stranger Things 3 because I have not seen it all yet. So no. So I'm laying that down right now. Is we're not spoiling anything about Stranger Things 3.
Well, by the time this comes out, you sure as heck better because I don't know if I can hang on that long.
Oh no! By the time this episode comes out, I will have seen the whole thing. But
right
as of tonight, no spoiling.
Right.
Okay. If you have not yet left us a review wherever you get your podcast, leave us a review. That's a nice, easy way for you to support the show. Unless you want to just send us envelopes of cash, you could do that too. That we absolutely are willing to take those. If you have envelopes of cash laying around that you just don't know where to send them, you can get in touch with us and let us know, and we will direct you on where to send those. But otherwise, if you want to just leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, wherever it might be, please do that because that does help out the show as well. And then visit our website, 30podcast.com. That's where you can find all of our past episodes, a link to our Letterboxd page, which is another great way to kind of interact with our shows and browse a nice visual carousel of movie posters and titles. And you can find our show that way too and pick one of our past episodes if there's a movie that you really, really like that has come between the years of 1984 and 1989. So that's where we're at right now. So, All right. In terms of movie news, I don't think there's too much going on movie news wise.
Can I throw something out?
Do you have something?
I saw Toy Story 4. I guess now it'll be a couple beats back. And I just want to give that a shout out. Fantastic.
Okay.
Fantastic. And it's 25 years old. I mean, the first one came out in 95. And I'm just like, it just keeps getting better and in depth and better, but I should say richer and deeper and just more. They bring so much humanity and story and deep concepts through this which is an animated film for kids, which it's not just for kids, but you get what I'm saying. So Toy Story 4, fantastic. The other thing I want to say is my family has taken a deep dive into the world of How to Train Your Dragon. And my kids always kind of liked it and watched the TV shows. Dominic read the books and it was kind of like, okay, I know about it. And I'd ask him, tell me what about the plot. And I'd read some of the books with him and all that. Well, then all of a sudden the third movie came out, and I don't even know that I hadn't seen the first two movies. And so we rented it the other night, and I'm just kind of sitting down and watching it. And within like 30 seconds, I'm like, I am sucked into this thing. It's fantastic. And the music is excellent. And so we went back and watched the first two movies, and it's like, I'm hooked. Like these stories, I found myself like, I'm tearing up, I'm laughing. And so I'm just very excited, especially 2019, we've got two fantastic, and there's probably more that I'm just not thinking about, but you've got How to Train Your Dragon 3, Toy Story 4, just these fantastic animated franchises, and with just great music, and great stories and themes. And so that's just kind of my new movie news is just that, fantastic animated movies are all around us.
Nice. Now, I did want to do. Actually, before we move away from Toy Story 4, I did want to say we were walking around during one of our road trips that we were on. I think we stopped at a Walmart just to kind of get out and walk around for a while, and we walked past the toy section, and they had is his name Forky?
Yeah.
It's like a spork with arms in it, and so we walked past that, and I took a picture of it. And I think I might have tweeted this out, but I took a picture of the toy. They were selling the toy for like $12. Mm-hmm. I snapped a picture, and my son was there, and I turned to him and I said, I think you could probably just get a spork from a Taco Bell, put some pipe cleaner around it, and really it would be a lot less than paying $12 for this doll that they're selling.
Yes.
Because that's kind of his character in the movie, isn't he? Just kind of made up of like googly eyes, a spork, and some pipe cleaner.
Yep.
Yeah, Bo, have you seen Toy Story 4?
I have not, but my nieces have told me all about it.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's exactly it. And actually, we came home after seeing Toy Story 4, and that was the first thing Daniela did. Was we didn't have a spork, but we had a spoon, and the spork won't the spoon won't go into someone's eye, so we actually made Spoonie, which is Daniela's answer to Forky is Spoonie. But
you guys,
and that's the reason I bring that up is because the only movie news that I really found just looking real quick was that they are recalling all of those action figures of Forky because kids are poking themselves in the eye.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
I can't even.
We who grew up with Superman slime and all kinds of other crazy pokey toys, and somehow most of us survived, and now kids are Disney is selling sporks and kids are poking themselves in the eye.
Heck, we grew up with BB guns and bow and arrow sets.
No.
And jarts.
Mm-hmm.
Charts. Oh, I got in so much trouble with charts.
God, I love those things.
I know.
So real quick, I mean this is not necessarily a new movie news thing, but and I do want to do, maybe if we have time to do an episode, maybe at the end of July or beginning of August, do kind of like a catch up from a whole bunch of different summer movies that we've had a chance to see. But I do want to say real quick, at the time that this episode will come out, it's been a couple weeks now, maybe like 3 weeks now. My wife and I had a chance to go see the movie yesterday, the Beatles one.
Okay.
That is a really good movie. So if you have not seen it yet, if you like Beatles music at all, then that is just a really fun movie.
Okay.
So it was one of those that, like, there are moments in the movie where you think it could take a kind of cynical turn, but it really is just, actually my sister said it best. She's like, that movie is the definition of when they say like feel good movie of the summer, like that movie is the definition of a feel good movie. Like there are moments where things could take a very dark and cynical turn and the movie makes you think it's going to go that way, but then it doesn't.
Got it.
So
is it,
my wife just texted me from the other room and said, you'll enjoy it even if you aren't a huge Beatles fan.
Is it a biopic with actors or is it like a documentary?
No, this is one where the main character, his name is Jack, and he is not a very good musician.
Okay.
Like he tries to play gigs in pubs, and the first part takes place in England. He's trying to play gigs in pubs, and his manager is the actress Lily James. She was Cinderella in the live action Cinderella they did a few years ago. She was, if anybody watches Downton Abbey, she was it Lady Rose? Rose was her name in Downton Abbey. She's kind of his manager.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, she's his manager, but she also likes him, even though he doesn't really notice that she likes him, and she's liked him for years. And the premise of the movie is he's not a very good musician. He's about to give up on his music, and something happens so that all the lights in the world go out at the same time, He gets hit by a bus, and when he wakes up in the hospital, he slowly starts to realize through comments he's making and songs he's playing on his guitar that no one has ever heard of the Beatles before. And so he like, looks through his record collection, and the Beatles are not there anymore. He tries Googling the Beatles. They don't exist anymore, but he remembers all of the songs, and he's trying to piece the lyrics back together. And he decides that he's going to start singing the Beatles songs, and it causes him to be more noticed than he was before.
Nice.
The movie kind of takes off from there, but it's really, really good movie.
Is this something like, my mom is a huge Beatle fan? Is this something?
You should go see this movie then.
Okay, so it's not like just an our generation thing. Like this is something that.
No. If you're not a Beatles fan, like Sharon's not a huge Beatles fan. Like she's come with me. We've seen that cover band American English. A couple times, and we've gone to some other things that are kind of.
They're supposed to be really good.
They are very good. They are very good. We've seen, there was another one. I don't remember if I think they were called Beatlemania or something like that. They came to the Lincolnshire Marriott one time, and we got tickets to go see them there. So, my dad was a huge Beatles fan. I grew up listening to the Beatles all the time. I like the Beatles. She's not a huge Beatles fan, but she's come with me to some things, so she knows enough about the music and the Beatles. But still, not a huge fan. Still, she loved this movie, and I think even if it was somebody who didn't know the music all that well, I think they would still just enjoy the movie for what it is. But if you are a Beatles fan, I think you'd really enjoy this movie.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, Pat, if your mom's a big Beatles fan, she should definitely go see this.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and it's not like there's almost nothing questionable in this movie. Like there's not necessarily a lot of swearing. There's not a lot of sex. It's just a fun movie. And
okay, cool.
You can have fun at this movie, and I'm trying to remember, like, even if we could show this to the kids, I don't remember if there's any part in the movie necessarily where it's something that I'd say, oh no, I don't think the kids should see that. It might have been rated PG-13, but I don't remember why. So yeah, but anyway, just a really fun movie.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, definitely. If your mom's a Beatles fan, she should go see this movie.
All right, cool.
It's called Yesterday.
Got it. All right, I'm sending that.
The director was Danny Boyle, who also did Slumdog Millionaire and Train Spotting, and so,
awesome.
Yeah, definitely put that on your watch list.
Got it. Okay.
All right. Let's see. So I think in terms of new movie news, that's probably it. Yeah. So let's jump in the DeLorean. We'll head back to 89 for just a moment here. So we are looking at kind of like the week of, this will be about July 11th to July 18th, 1989. I'm going to start off with some more depressing ones. But on July 10th of 1989, comedian and voice actor Mel Blanc, who did the Looney Tunes like Bugs Bunny, Elmer Fudd, he died on July 10th, 1989. On July 11th, the actor Laurence Olivier died. On July 14th, it was the 200th anniversary of the French Revolution.
All right.
And then on July 17th, it was the first test flight of the stealth bomber.
Oh, wow.
The top book was The Russia House by John le Carré. This is still up there. It's going to be there for several weeks. Top movie, Lethal Weapon 2, took over from Batman for a few weeks.
Okay.
And then the top song was Good Thing by Fine Young Cannibals. Our movie this time is Born on the 4th of July. It came out on the 20th of December, 1989 in a limited release. Rated R with a runtime of 2 hours and 25 minutes. Director is Oliver Stone, who also did Platoon, Wall Street, and JFK. Producers were A. Kitman Ho, who did Wall Street, Ali, and Hotel Rwanda. Lope V. Juban Jr., I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, also did produce Born Legacy and 13 Days, and Oliver Stone was one of the producers as well, did JFK, Nixon, and Any Given Sunday. Writers are Ron Kovic, who did the book and screenplay, and Oliver Stone, who did the screenplay. Kovic, this is his only credit, Born on the 4th of July. Stone is also a writer for Midnight Express, Scarface, and Conan the Barbarian. Cinematography by Robert Richardson, who did Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2 and The Aviator. Music by John Williams, who did Star Wars, Harry Potter, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, all that fun stuff. Budget on this one was $17.8 million. Box office was $161 million. Rotten Tomatoes critics gives it an 89%. Rotten Tomatoes audience gives it a 76%. IMDb gives it a 72%. Letterboxd a 70%. And CinemaScore gives it an A-. Starring Tom Cruise as Ron Kovic. He was in Top Gun and Last Samurai. Raymond J. Barry was Mr. Kovic. He was in Sudden Death and Falling Down. Caroline Cava was Mrs. Kovic. She was in Year of the Dragon and an episode of Quantum Leap. Tom Berenger played Recruiting Gunnery Sergeant Hayes. He was in Platoon and Major League. Frank Whaley played Timmy. He was in Pulp Fiction and The Doors. Jerry Levine played Steve Boyer. He was in Teen Wolf and K-9. A lot of dog themes there. Kyra Sedgwick was Donna. She was in The Closer and Phenomenon. Tom Sizemore played a vet in the Villa Dulce scenes. He was in Saving Private Ryan and Black Hawk Down. Michael Wincott also played a vet in the Villa Dulce scenes. He was in Basquiat and Talk Radio. Brian Larkin played young Ron Kovic. He was in Edward Scissorhands and Jacob's Ladder. And finally, Willem Dafoe played Charlie. He was in Last Temptation of Christ, Platoon, and Shadow of the Vampire. Here is the trailer for Born on the 4th of July, and we'll be back just a moment.
I wanted to be a good American. I wanted to serve my country. I couldn't wait to fight my first war.
We got him! We got him! Look it up!
Let the word go forth.
Daddy, the soldier!
And the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans.
Your brother's a hard worker, Tommy. Win or lose, school, sports, life. As long as you do your best. That's what matters to God.
First off, young men, let's get one thing straight. There is nothing prouder as a United States Marine.
Our dad's got to go to WW2. This is our chance to do something.
You should think about what you're doing. You could get yourself killed. Did you ever think about that?
Just help me, Jesus. Help me to make the right decision. Sometimes I just like to stay here and never leave. But I gotta go.
13,000 miles. It's a long way to go to fight a war.
Don't you know what it means to me to be a Marine, Dad? Ever since I was a kid, I've wanted this. I wanted to serve my country. I want to go to Vietnam. And I'll die there if I have to.
There's something happening here.
You gotta try and stay alive, okay? You hear me?
Ain't exactly clear.
Chicago has an Alice in Wonderland quality about it. Things are getting curiouser and curiouser.
Come on, get up there, get up there. Keep going, come on.
Stop, children, watch that sound. Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their mind are getting so much resistance from behind. Time way to stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what one, two, three, four. We don't want to sing it more. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want to sing it more.
People say if you don't love America, then get the hell out. Traitors! Traitors! I love America.
Okay, so Born on the 4th of July. Let's just start with our usual question. Is this the first time you guys have seen this movie?
Not for myself.
Okay.
Might be the first time I sat down and watched it all the way through.
Okay.
I have definitely seen portions of it, knew of it, sort of knew what I was in for, but...
Okay. I knew roughly what I was getting. I had not seen it before, but I knew kind of what I was getting in for. I knew, I had seen clips of some of the scenes. I don't remember why or how, but some of the scenes of maybe of him at the... was that the one at the Republican convention? Yes, at the Republican convention. I remember seeing like that clip where he's talking to the press and they're trying to drag him away. But I don't recall having seen anything else from this movie. So this was a totally brand new first viewing for me. But Pat, you said you have seen this before.
Yeah, I have seen this. I have seen this film before, and that's pretty much it. I saw it back in. I think I saw it back in high school, and I started off with bits and pieces of it, and then at some point between high school and college, watched the whole thing, cover to cover, as they say, and it's and this is the first time I've watched it cover to cover since back in that time. So
okay. So what did you think of it like that when you've seen it the first time?
I know I'm putting in these dramatic pauses just because I mean, what do you say? Right. I mean, it is it's a powerful movie on so many levels, and I'm going to preface everything I say in this podcast just with I have not served, and so I want to be really careful and very respectful before I start throwing around opinions. That about people that have served, as well as, a war that happened before I was even born. Right. Those things being said, it's just.
Well, and I'll stop you right there for a second. Just say none of us have. Like none of the three of us here have served in the military. We were all born after the Vietnam War took place. So go ahead. I just wanted to throw that out there for everyone listening. And
I remember growing up and in discussing the war, the Vietnam War, because growing up that was the war. That was the most recent war that was discussed, or not discussed. And it was such a. From what I've read and talked to people and all that, it was such a time of upheaval and a time of struggle. And, you look at this and I mean, it's a very stark portrait of how the people that went and served our country were ultimately treated. And I don't want to say just even ultimately, but even before that. I mean, the idea of going off to serve and, it was portrayed as, that this is going to be a good thing and it's going to be a glorious thing. And it was almost likened to, a wrestling match or some sort of a game or something like that. And, the way they portrayed it in the movie is you could tell right from that first parade that he saw when he was a kid, and you could see the guys walking down the street that were all either torn up or you could tell they weren't quite right. You knew that this was going to be kind of a different approach. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but I've read a number of books on it, and I think that Ken Burns documentary was amazing about the Vietnam War. I don't know if you guys caught that. That I think I think that's a must watch, personally. But it interviewed more Marines. Actually, a lot of the people that they interviewed were Marines, and one of the things that they talked about was just coming back and soldiers that were being spit upon, or soldiers that just basically threw their uniform in the trash and just tried to get back. And this whole post-traumatic stress disorder, I mean, that wasn't even approached. And, you might get into what was the difference between this and World War II or World War I or Korea? Well, I think the difference was, this is, those wars, they ended, well, maybe not Korea, but I mean, World War II and it ended with parades and it ended with this, and, that it was just kind of glossed over. And I think this war being as long as it was and ending the way it did, and then just kind of being swept under the rug, I mean, it's very much like an open wound. And like I said, I remember growing up and talking to people that would just say, this wasn't a war, it was a conflict, or we didn't lose, it was a draw. And like I said, I think that Ken Burns documentary interviewed people that were generals, people that were privates in the field. I mean, and it just really showed a lot of what these guys struggled with. Now, I'm just kind of rambling. It's just all these thoughts that are going through my head as I'm watching the movie. I'll try and bring it back. But when you watch this movie that was based on a real guy, and I would assume that a lot of the things that they portrayed in there were, if it didn't quite happen to him in that way, it happened to someone. But, you see this and, his family doesn't quite accept him back. He doesn't feel like he's at home. I mean, there's people that are protesting the war and, they're angry about the war, but they're angry about this. They're angry at the soldiers, and all they did was follow the orders. It's not like they're asking to be, you know what I'm saying? It's not like they're the ones instituting the government policy. And watching that Ken Burns documentary, and in reading a couple of books by, service personnel that were there, I mean, it was just, we were just let down almost on every level by the government. I mean, just the way the war was fought, the way it was conceived, the way the soldiers were treated when they came home. And it just very painful to see. And this one line that just comes out of that Ken Burns documentary, as I think about this, is this one guy just kept saying in that documentary, is he says, he talked about a lot of the after effects and what happened and what happened to him in Vietnam while he was fighting the war, and just with the brutality in that. And he said, this is what happens when you send your kids to fight your wars. I mean, they're 18, 19-year-old kids. I mean, it's just like, dear Lord. And then to see that aftermath when they get back. And I mean, I almost think, now that's, and I think probably starting with like the Gulf War is there just seems to be just so much, we support the troops, that, and unfortunately, I mean, everything gets politicized, and I'm going to try and sidestep that. But I think that seems to be one thing that's wrong now in all these more recent wars that we've been involved with, is this knowledge of PTSD and this knowledge of, hey, we got to support the troops. And now we're almost on the other side of it where, it's automatic that you say, thank you for your service. And now the message is, okay, well, we kind of have to move beyond that, because we don't even think about that anymore. We just say, thank you for your service. And you just make sure that you do that. But there's got to be some thought behind that as well. So I don't know if any of that made sense, but I have a lot of thoughts about this movie and what it portrays. And I just think it's just very important watching, whether you agree with it or not. And again, if I'm offending anyone that's served or whatnot with what I say, I apologize. But sitting here and looking at that, I think that's just an important side to see, when we talk about getting our men and women in the service involved in war and involved in something that there's that very human cost, and seeing what happened. Well, first of all, seeing them torn up in battle, but then coming back and just, there was no support back here. I mean, even the family didn't know how to support him. I mean, they were yelling at him yelling at him for swearing. I mean, the mom was just, and I think maybe a very real attitude, but it was just like, oh my God, your son is. So I'm rambling. I apologize, but those were kind of my thoughts that I've had with this movie. So.
No, it literally the definition of a podcast is that we just sit and ramble for about an hour. So
yeah, that's kind of what we do here.
Okay, good. Well, like I said, it's
unless I missed the memo, that's what I've been doing.
Okay. Well, all right, good. I'm just making sure I'm within the bounds. But anyways, those
no, none of what you said is off base.
It sticks, and it's just there's just a lot. I just remember when I first saw it in high school, I just would keep going back to these scenes and just try and somehow frame that and say, well, how does this, how does this fit in? Like what's going on? So anyway, those are my thoughts on seeing the movie. So what did you guys think?
Any anti-war movie is designed to stir up feelings on both sides, and coupled with the fact that this was Oliver Stone, who was gonna, he's trying to dredge up feelings in any movie he makes. I like the movie. I like the story. It's telling as a story. I know it was based on the book that he wrote. I'd love to read that book just to see how truthful it is to the source material. It's like every, we are a movie podcast, so I will complain about the movie a little bit. Like every Oliver Stone movie, it's a little long. But at the same time, I feel like it jumps around a lot in places where it doesn't need to. Like, I almost feel like it needed to be longer in some places. I felt like some of the early stuff, it would have been more interesting to see him earlier in his tour of duty, maybe. Because I feel like we jump into Vietnam and then all of a sudden he has this problem, and I know we want to focus on everything that goes on back at home. But it would have been a little more interesting to develop the drive of this character who becomes the character we see in the future. I feel like so much time is dedicated to the end that we could have used a little more in the beginning. But the story itself is very powerful, and it makes a lot of salient points. I mean, it highlights that the troops were treated poorly, and it, sort of brings up, why are the troops the ones that people lashed out at?
Yeah.
And the short answer is it's because they were there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see the generals and the presidents and the other people. You see the troops, and it's just wrong the way they were treated. And
Right.
if you take it as a, it's wrong the way we treated these people movie, then it's a different movie than if you treat it as a straight up anti-war movie. And I think that's one of the reasons this movie's talked about so much, is because it does have a lot of different angles to it.
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder too, because I know this is, as I was reading up a few things, and I had not, before doing this podcast, I had not seen any of these three movies, and I still have not seen the third one. This is kind of the second movie in Oliver Stone's Vietnam trilogy that he did. What is it? The third one is called like Heaven and Earth, or something like that?
It's another one I haven't seen.
Yeah. It's something, I think Heaven is in the title. It's like Heaven and Earth or something like that.
Let me see if I can track it down.
But so in watching this one, I kind of thought that too. I was like, okay, well, Platoon spent all of its time in the war. Like you were in the fighting. And this one is more of the what happens when you come home.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, Bo, that was the same issue that I had with the movie was
Heaven and Earth, you called it.
Is it Heaven and Earth? Okay. Mm-hmm. And I think that was like 93.
Wow, that's disturbing.
Okay.
Yeah, you hit that.
I aim to disturb.
Succeeded.
So, Platoon spent all of its time in what's happening to these guys on the battlefield, in the jungles. What's going on to them there, what's going on with them there, and then this one is all about what's going on when you get back home. I don't know what the Heaven and Earth one is about, but the same issue that I had was where you start to see him turn is when they go into that village and there's the babies, there's the family that's been inadvertently killed through their mistake, and then the fact that he shoots his squad mate accidentally in the chaos and the confusion and everything else. I think that went a little too quickly. Like I completely agree with you, Bo, that there are stretches of this movie where I remember watching it going, okay, well, we could have. Not that I'm like, I want this movie to hurry up and be over, but I'm like, we could have either cut some scenes here, or this seems a little repetitive here. I would have liked to have spent more time having him deal with that kind of stuff. Because otherwise his turn, it shows clips of him going to these different things and listening to people who are talking about, the evils of the Vietnam War and whatnot. And then over time, that seems to be what turns him, at least it comes across that way to me watching the movie. And I kind of felt like, well, I feel like that whole thing with the baby, and that crying baby sound effect comes back when he's giving the speech on the 4th of July parade. And I would have liked to have seen that get repeated a little bit here and there. And I know that this is based off of a true story, so I don't know. I haven't read the book, and I don't really know that much about the real Ron Kovic's life. But the character of his high school sweetheart, like the one that he liked, Kyra Sedgwick's character, at one point, like she goes off to plan a meeting where they lost their speaker, and we don't ever see her again.
Right.
And I was like, well wait a minute. Like,
she go?
First of all, she seemed to be a really central figure to a lot of what's going on with him. And then they have this talk, and she talks about all these letters that he sent where he could tell her about things that he couldn't speak out loud before. And then when he does finally start to come around to her way of thinking, we don't ever see her again. And I was like, okay, well, I know this is based on a true story, but just for me, not knowing the true story and watching this as a standalone movie, I'm sitting there going, well, where's the resolution with that character? If I'm looking at this from a movie standpoint, I'm like, I kind of would have liked to seen her come back and like to see, like, what does that look like when now he doesn't disagree with her? When they're on the same side now, what happens to them? Like, are they friends? Are they more than friends? What happens there? So yeah, there were just a few things here and there, movie wise. There were a few things here and there that were just a little disjointed, and like you said, as with a lot of Oliver Stone movies, it was a little longer than probably what it needed to be in certain stretches. But that's just in terms of the movie. In terms of the content, in terms of the message that it's getting across, I'm not going to say that this is a movie that I'm going to go back and rewatch anytime soon, but it definitely got its point across.
Right.
It reminded me of that, and I think we used the same quote when we talked about Platoon. So we've come full circle here. The Sherman quote from the Civil War that ends with "War is hell." And I pulled up the full quote because I wanted to see it. And as I was reading over this quote again, I'm like, that kind of like, that's the feeling that you get from watching this movie. So this is and hopefully this is an accurate quote. I've tried to, look up real quick to just make sure that these are, word for word what he said. But as much research as I could do real quick in the last 15 minutes, this is what I found. But his quote is, "I am tired and sick of war. Its glory is all moonshine. It is only those who have neither fired a shot nor heard the shrieks and groans of the wounded who cry aloud for blood, for vengeance, for desolation. War is hell." And I think this movie completely sums that up. Like the feelings of someone who was there, who went through it, and yet came back home and got all this criticism. And not that some of the criticism, Pat, as you said, not that some of the criticism wasn't unfounded. Like there were definitely things to criticize. About the way that the war was handled, but directed at probably the wrong people.
Well, and I think too, and obviously I get what you guys are saying about the movie, because I when I watched it as well, I was like, wow, they kind of jump pretty quick from here to here to here, from point A to point B. Now going into the story piece, like you said, yeah, and I'm again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but I'll tell you, there is a great book out there called Dereliction of Duty by General H.R. McMaster, and it was written some time ago, but it talks about on the government level, and it actually goes all the way back to, and he talks about just the way like the Joint Chiefs of Staff and all the various upper echelons of military like work together, and he talks about that, and even just the whole philosophy of how we got involved with Vietnam, the way the war was fought, and it's not quite as simple as well, we didn't fight to win, but there were just things that the way the whole war was fought, it wasn't making sense. It wasn't proving out. And then this whole thing, and again, I'm referencing this book, but this whole thing got going, and then it was just like it was, I don't want to sum it up and make it simple, but it was like we couldn't admit that we blew it, let's get out. And so for 10 or more years, we sit there and kept going, into the grinder with this thing. And that, again, that Ken Burns documentary does a great job of breaking it down. And they're interviewing some of these guys, and they're just even talking about what we were fighting. It was kind of the bill of goods of, well, you got to fight the spread of communism. But when you look at it on the other standpoint, and these aren't my words, I mean, these are the words of some of the people that were over there fighting, is it was a people that had been at war for 30, 40 years, and all they wanted was their own homeland. And it was like I said, when you look at these pieces, now obviously this movie doesn't give you that top-down view. It doesn't, you're not going into policy. You're basically at a very, like, the grunts view. He doesn't really they don't even show strategy much beyond like the platoon level, because I think the highest rank he's talking to is like the lieutenant. When they're trying to figure out, it's like, advance to this village, okay, pull back from this, like that's the only view you get. And other than that was just the bill of goods being sold to him, like, well, we're going to go out, you're going to defend, and then when he comes back, it is almost, and I've read this about people that had gone and served and then came back, so much was changing socially that, you come back and it's like, this isn't the country that I left. And it was evidenced in some of those scenes where, people were throwing things at him and protesting at the parade. And, he was visiting friends that suddenly the friends were like, had no clue what he'd been through, and they'd changed. And it was only, he met the one friend, I think, that was also a veteran. And then that was where he had some common ground, because it was like the guy had been there. And so he could understand what he had gone through. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's something I've read, is just very much that, like, yeah, the world has changed. And then the thing is that it was a publicized war. I don't think any war previous had, embedded photographers and all that. And so, yeah, I mean, they're like, the quote by Sherman was, from what I understand, spot on. So you're going to take a look at, the death of innocent people and, women and children and the elderly and so on and so forth. And it's real easy to just, go after the soldiers that blew it. And, you don't want to sit there and say, well, our army's out there killing innocents. But I think that just it needs to be factored in when, you're going to use force or start a war. This is a reality. And you're going to be, you're asking your kids that, are thinking wrestling matches and football games and the prom date, you're training them to be killers. I mean, you just, think of that thing in Full Metal Jacket. I mean, just think of what happens in like that basic training and when they're training these, just think about that. And it's there's a cost. And, so.
As we were watching this movie, it just gave you a sense of, you have no idea what life was like at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
We were commenting because we were born after Vietnam.
Right.
Both my wife and I were commenting. We're just like, we have no conception of what this would have been like. Watching these riots at the Democratic Convention in Chicago,
mm-hmm.
and all this stuff happened. A decade or so before we were born. And it just, if this movie, like, I forget which one of you said it, but this movie earlier, one of you guys said, is that this has a powerful message and it gets its message across. Whether you like Oliver Stone or not, he does a great job of whatever message he's trying to get across, he gets it across.
Mm-hmm.
Agree with it or not, like it or not, that's one thing that I think he's really, really good at, is getting that across. One of the things that I really enjoyed, and I think I picked out the wrong thing, but all the scenes when they're in Vietnam and there's the fighting going on, everything seemed to have kind of an orange tint to it.
Yeah, he did that on purpose. The color choices, the color palette
And,
choices.
Well, at first I was thinking, as I was watching the movie, I was like, oh, so you know what? Everything, when he's in battle and he's in Vietnam, everything kind of has this orangey red tint to it. So maybe that's like, and I took the idea from the war is hell quote, and I thought maybe he's trying to make this look like hell. Mm-hmm. Like they're in Vietnam, they're in hell. Things are on fire. The sky is on fire. And that's what I was kind of taking from it, until I read a little bit after watching the movie that it's actually broken up into red, white, and blue.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
There are scenes of, the war scenes. A lot of that are scenes where it's red. The blue, if there was something sad going on, then it was usually filmed in more of kind of a blue tint, and then dream sequences or things like that were filmed in white. So that part I did not pick up, but I definitely picked up, that was kind of that first stark, the orange with the black, when you first see the soldiers kind of coming up over that hill. The first moment you see them in Vietnam, and that part, I thought that was so well done. And I immediately picked up on that. I'm like, this is a very nice artistic touch to really get at the idea of, we're not back in Long Island anymore. And I had completely, I knew this ahead of time from looking up, who was involved in this movie. Had completely forgotten that John Williams did the score for this. I think because there was so much popular music that was used that you don't really hear, at least I didn't feel like I heard the score quite as much.
You don't hear it in this one as much as I think you feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Being the trumpet geek, I picked up right away that the opening thing of that trumpet call. I mean, that really stood out. And then it's funny because I caught John Williams' names just as I was watching the opening credits, and I'm like, oh wow. And it almost reminded me a little bit of how, like, Saving Private Ryan, what he used with that, because that opened with like a trumpet call as well. Okay. And then I think but yeah, I remember picking that up, and I guess I kind of saw the cheat sheet because I saw the credits. I noticed it right in the credits, and so then my ears were suddenly like cued in to like try to listen to the music. But yeah, it was a very, very good score, and that melody and the way he writes it too is it's this melody. It's a simple melody that just repeats, and it's a very somber, kind of sullen thing, and it's just eerie how it just kind of repeats 2 or 3 times every time it comes up with that solo trumpet.
Now, the one thing I will say is, watching this movie, I'm gonna tell a little story here, and I'm not like, I don't want anybody listening to think that I am in, just blanket criticizing war or guns or anything like that. But I may have said this before on the podcast, and I know that even between the three of us, we have differing opinions on this. I'm not a gun guy. Like I'm not. I won't ever own a gun. And I have my own opinions on that, and I'm not gonna tell anybody that they have to share my opinions. I'm not gonna force that on anybody, but I will say, having watched this movie after going to Texas, where I grew up, and lived around people who had guns, who went hunting, who did all that stuff, we had a respect for them. I had never shot a real gun before. And so I went down to Texas for a few days to visit family, and they while I was there, they said, "Hey, we're gonna take you out and do a few things today. We're gonna go. There's this little town that's got some really nice shopping, and we're gonna take everybody out to dinner for this barbecue place, and we're gonna go to the gun range." And I was like, "Oh,
right," because people just do that.
It's like, all right. So I definitely wanted to be polite, and I was like, "All right, I'll go along with this. I'll see what's going to happen here." And,
was this recently, or is this a couple of years ago?
No, this was 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So went to the gun range with my family, and they brought their 2 guns with them, and one was a Glock and one was a 357. And so I had the revolver. It wasn't a very big revolver, but we bought a couple of different kinds of range bullets and all that, and then for fun, I'm using that with quote fingers, for fun, they had also purchased some 357 Magnums.
Sure.
And I'm like, yeah, okay.
That's what people do.
This Dirty Harry, right? I mean, let's give it a try. And having never fired a real gun before, having fired BB guns and paintball guns and stuff like that, an air rifle. When I was in middle school, we had an after school club that was like a marksmanship club, and we used the air rifles and BB guns and all that. But having never fired a real gun before, I'm not going to. It's kind of weird, because I don't necessarily want to say I enjoyed my time at the gun range, because I'm not sure that I did. I didn't hate it.
I was going to say, but you didn't hate it.
I didn't hate it.
I understand that.
But I also didn't enjoy it, because to me, it was terrifying. Like, not the kind of terrifying where I'm going to go like run and hide in a fetal position in a corner. But it was just when I fired that gun, and especially that Magnum bullet, it, like a cannon was going off in my hand. And I thought, oh dear God, like these are, and then I went to go watch this movie, where you have people firing all kinds of large weapons and guns. And I'm like, I can only imagine, especially when you see the scenes in the parade and the guys are flinching when they hear the firecrackers. I'm like, I was in a gun range that was a fairly safe place with ear protection on, and felt the kickback, the impact of firing this gun, and it scared me. And I was not in a war situation, so I can only imagine what these men and women have to deal with when they come back, and they're in a situation like a 4th of July where there's firecrackers and there's those kind of noises, and the confusion of being in that scene where he ends up shooting his squad mate. I was in a safe place, and it was, yeah. I don't necessarily have the words to describe what it was. But being someone who's not a gun person, and firing a gun several times, and I stayed there the entire time, the full hour, and fired off all the rounds that we had, and we all took turns, using a couple of different guns and all that. It's marked off my bucket list. I don't know that I'm ever going to go do it again. I'm never going to own a gun, but that was just something that it brought new appreciation to weapons and to war and how weapons are used in certain ways and all that. So when I was watching this movie, I was like, I know what this was like to do it in a safe and controlled place. I can only imagine the chaos and the confusion and just the utter madness of being in a war zone. I can only imagine. But yeah, so that was my story of firing a gun and then watching a war movie.
Kind of brought it home a little bit more.
It did. Like this is, I see it on TV. I see it in movies, and occasionally I'll play a video game where it happens, and it just does not have the same, when you actually fire that gun. I'm like, oh wow, this is actually something that people use.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it I think it kind of added a little extra flavor to my viewing of Born on the 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is there anything else? Oh, I had a couple of things before we get into our 5 questions and all that stuff. There were a couple things on here that I know that Ron Kovic kind of worked very closely with Oliver Stone. Like they wrote this together. So I think for the most part, it's pretty accurate. Probably taking a few liberties here and there for the Hollywood movie, but for the most part, I think it's pretty accurate. The one thing I did want to mention is Tom Cruise. Like this is his first, I think, from what I can remember, this is really kind of his first major dramatic role. Like up to this point, he's Maverick. He's he's in the movie Legend. He's in all these kind of action movies, or he's in Rain Man. I mean, I guess you can count Rain Man, but
did you ever?
This movie was a bit more of a stretch for him than some of the others.
Yeah. Now I don't know if this counts, but did you see when he was real young? Did you ever see the movie Taps?
No.
Taps is a pretty good movie. I mean, Taps is a pretty good movie, and he plays.
It has been years since I saw that, but yeah.
Okay.
And so, but I get what you're saying about it being a dramatic turn, because I read something about it that, they weren't sure if Tom Cruise was the guy for this role. But that's the only other thing I could think of previous to this, unless it's an action movie, of something that's a little bit more dramatic. But I don't, Bo, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he was like the main guy in Taps. I mean, he was
not.
Okay.
You had
It was
George
a bunch.
Scott, Timothy Hutton,
Yeah.
Ronnie Cox, Sean Penn. I mean,
Yeah.
it was
But
quite
that-
the movie. But
but
gosh,
that was-
it has been a long time since I saw Taps.
Yeah.
Good movie, John. It's
Okay. Let's put that
it's
on
a
the
very
list.
classic military cadets that covering up a scandal
Okay.
type movie.
Yeah.
God, that makes me think of another one that's just like that. That's also very good, but I'm not going to remember. I think I just came up with it. Yep.
Okay.
Very similar movie called Dress Gray.
Okay.
This one's got Alec Baldwin, Lloyd Bridges, Hal Holbrook. Very similar military academy cover-up type story.
Okay.
Both very good.
Okay. All right. I will add Taps to the list. But yeah, no, I mean, I thought for this to be his first, other than maybe like Rain Man, for this to be his first kind of leading man,
Kmart sucks, right?
dramatic. Yeah. Well, Judge Wapner's going to be on soon.
5 minutes to Wapner.
5 minutes to Wapner. I'm an excellent driver.
Excellent.
I think I almost said that when we test drove a car a couple of weeks ago. I almost said that when I got in the car.
think I did when we test
you?
drove our Tesla. It was awesome.
I didn't want to do that while the guy from the dealership was right there.
Oh, I did it.
Because okay. I didn't know if they'd pull the keys back from me if I did that.
This guy was pretty good natured, so
Okay,
I went with it.
Dad lets me back the car out of the driveway. I'm an excellent driver.
Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So I just, for this to be probably his first time at tackling that kind of a role, being the leading man, taking on one of these, it's kind of I don't know if it's become a cliche now that whenever somebody's going for an Oscar, you can tell somebody's trying to go for an Oscar because they've taken on the role where they don't look like themselves, like they've gone through, physically torturing their body to get into a role so that they could be in this dramatic part that will get them a Best Actor Oscar or whatever. And I kind of feel like this is his first chance at doing that. I'm like, wow, that I know what I think of in terms of like early Tom Cruise. And I think of some of his characters as being very similar.
Yeah.
I think of like Top Gun, and I think of A Few Good Men, and I think of I picture those movies, and I picture a very similar Tom Cruise. And then this one, it kind of starts that way a little bit, but then it definitely takes a turn, about a third of the way into the movie.
Yeah.
But I thought he did a great job with it.
Yeah, he seems in his career, he had a couple of those dramatic kind of things. And now it seems like at this point in his career, it seems like he's come kind of full circle again. And he plays, like the Mission Impossible, Ethan Hunt, Jack Reacher, you know, the roles that he's getting now, and I love it, man. I'll tell you, I can't.
You like Tom Cruise badass?
I kind of have a man crush on him. I mean,
It's hard not to.
I know, and just, I mean, the guy, like half the stunts that he does all this stuff. I mean, like even some of the
that just makes him a crazy person. I don't know.
Yeah, well, but even some of the bike scenes and the driving stuff, they're like, yeah, Tom did all the driving for this, and some of the stunt drivers that were interviewed said, yeah, he's as good of a driver as we are. So we'll be in the other cars, but he's out there. Yeah, he's doing his thing. Yeah. Anyways, I digress. But yeah, it seems like now it's these are the roles he's getting, and good on him for it.
I see he's already been announced to be in 2 more Mission Impossible movies.
Oh,
which is just insane to me, but bring it on, baby.
Yeah.
And I guess they're making. Did you guys see the movie Live, Die, Repeat?
No.
Or they also called it Edge of Tomorrow.
Oh yeah,
I heard about it. I didn't see it. I heard about it.
Well, because it didn't do well, I think, in theaters because they changed the title a couple of times.
Okay, that would be confusing.
Right, and even like right up until the movie came out, they changed the title again. I think it was called Live, Die, Repeat, and then I want to say they switched the title to Edge of Tomorrow, but they didn't switch it on all the posters. Whoops. And then when it was released on video again, they switched it back to Live, Die, Repeat. So I don't know. But anyway,
which is, they're doing it's very meta because that's pretty much what happens.
Right. And they're doing a sequel to that one called Live, Die, Repeat, and Repeat. So apparently he's going to be in that one too. And then his next one coming up is the Top Gun sequel.
Yeah.
Which, as much as I love the idea of him being a badass, I'm not sure I'm up for the Top Gun sequel. I got to be honest.
So. Yeah,
I feel like it's ruining my childhood for there to be a Top Gun sequel.
Okay, well, I don't go into that ruining childhood thing.
That's what I'm saying.
It didn't. It didn't ruin your childhood.
I know.
Okay, I know he does kind of go back in time in that movie. Did he go back in time and slap you upside the head as a child?
Maybe.
Then it didn't ruin your childhood.
Maybe.
You'll be okay.
Says you.
Says me, right? And I'm the host here, so what I say goes.
Well, when he puts it that way, what do I have, Pat? I got nothing.
So there.
I'm just
Mm-hmm. I will say real quick before we get into our 5 questions and all that, one of my favorite movies of his is The Last Samurai.
Yeah, good one.
Love that movie.
Yep.
Love that. I don't even know. I think I worked in the movie theater close to when that movie came out, and so I think I went back to see that thing. I don't know how many times. I might have seen that one as many times as I saw Two Towers in the movie theater. I really enjoyed The Last Samurai.
Yeah. Far and Away is fantastic. He's so good in that.
Eyes Wide Shut, say what you will about it, but he's pretty good in that too.
Yeah.
The password to every website I go to is Fidelio. I'll just let everyone on the podcast listening decide where they think the 1s and 0s go.
I'm just going to say it was all super creepy when they all started looking at him in that meeting.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're looking at him and it's just like, oh, dude, you better start punching your way out of this sucker. And I'm just, super spoilers. Okay, I'm just being careful because I'm going to Bond now.
Go for it.
In the most recent Bond, what's the one where he meets his half-brother and Monica Bellucci's in it. Anyways, James Bond, the Monica Bellucci one.
Yeah.
It almost reminded me of that scene. It was like I got the goosebumps and all that when the head of Spectre just kind of looks up and leans into the light and says, "Welcome, Mr. Bond." And then suddenly they're all looking at him. And then he has to punch his way out of it, and they get into this crazy exotic car chase through Italy. And that was almost like cathartic for what happened in Eyes Wide Shut, because suddenly they're all looking at him and he ends up getting his butt whooped or whatever the heck happens in that movie. That you had a similar scene in the Bond one, but at least Bond was able to fight his way out. So
I'm just disappointed that he went into that house in Eyes Wide Shut. They all started looking at him and he didn't pull out a microphone and start singing "You've Lost That Love and Feeling."
I know there was that
would have been so much better.
If they could have just juxtaposed, what would Ethan Hunt have done in that situation?
Right.
He would have jumped off an airplane.
Oh, man.
All right. Are we ready for 5 questions?
Ready if you are.
I have 5 of them. I don't know if you're ready for them or not, but all right. Well, here we go.
He asks each traveler 5 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
You've got to ask yourself one question.
What are you asking me for? I don't know.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. And may God have mercy on your soul.
All right, 5 questions. If you have not listened before, our 5 questions are kind of 5 loosely based questions on the movie that we're talking about. Or if I heard a word mentioned in the movie and I was like, hey, let's ask a question about that. Sometimes that's how loosely based they are. So 5 questions this time around for Born on the 4th of July. Number 1, favorite movie with an anti-war theme. And I'm gonna be that guy and change this question up on you at the last second.
Uh-oh.
I know. Because as I was thinking about it, I was like, well, okay, movie with an anti-war theme, but let me go back to that Sherman quote, the war is hell quote, and just say, if you can't think of something that's an anti-war themed movie, what about a movie that shows the hell of war?
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be an anti-war movie, but it just shows kind of how rough and how hellish war can be.
Well, I sort of am of 2 minds here. There are war movies that are anti-war movies that are serious, deep, dark anti-war movies. And then there are anti-war movies that...
Oh, you didn't pick mine, did you?
Oh, it depends. Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
No, please.
No, go ahead.
Because I have multiple. So
No, go.
Take yours. Go ahead.
No, I have multiple. I have multiple ones too. So go ahead.
All right. So I'm going to go with my favorite of the list I am staring at right here. And then I've got some honorable mentions we'll hit if nobody mentions them.
Okay.
But I love the movie Kelly's Heroes.
Okay, that's not the one I was going with.
Now, it has been panned by so many people. In fact, there's a war movie podcast called Friendly Fire, and all they do is war movies.
Oh, nice.
It's by a couple guys who do a Star Trek podcast I listen to, and then John Roderick, who does a podcast. I forget the name of his podcast, but it's a big one that people have heard of. And they ripped it to shreds. And I enjoy them so much that even them ripping a favorite movie of mine to shreds was fun. And they weren't wrong. Don't get me. I mean, they were right on everything they said, but I still love that movie.
Okay.
And it talks about how horrible war is, but at the same time, it's a heist movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a war movie and a heist movie all wrapped into one. And how can you go wrong?
Okay. Nice. All right, Pat, what's yours?
You know what? I don't think I got one.
Okay.
I don't think I've got one. I'm racking my brain. I've been thinking about it all day, and I don't know. This one would definitely be right up there. But you think of any of the movies, some of the ones we've talked about on the podcast. If they're well done, I mean, they're going to portray a very a dark side, and they will in some way try to bring a certain truth out, and yeah. So I just don't think I have one. Sorry, guys.
Okay. No, that's fine.
That's fine.
So I made a list of the anti-war movies I could think of, or the movies that, and I have a much shorter list of the movies that are probably not anti-war, but at least show you the horrors of war. One of the ones that I kind of jumped to right away that I don't feel is an anti-war movie, but definitely shows how terrible this can be, was Saving Private Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Especially that, storming the beach at the beginning of the movie. As I'm thinking about it now, Dunkirk, same thing.
Sure.
Not an anti-war movie, but just shows you just what people go through in this situation. As we said at the start of the podcast, none of the three of us have ever served. We've never been in a situation like that. So we're not criticizing. We're not, saying anything like that. I'm just saying it just is, can't even imagine like what that is like to be in a situation like that. But those two I think of as being movies that are not anti-war, but they do at least show you what it's like, or at least a portion of what it's like to be in a situation like that. And then I made a list of movies that were like Apocalypse Now, Das Boot, Bridge on the River Kwai, Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, obviously Dr. Strangelove was another one. The one that I'm going to land on though, and I go to this one because when this movie came out, I loved this movie. I watched this movie so many times. And that's the one I'm going to go with is Three Kings.
Very nice.
That I just really enjoy that movie. And it's not a serious one at all.
No, but it is so good.
It's just so much fun.
The color palette in that movie is just out of this world.
Yeah. Have you seen that one, Pat?
I have not.
You
I
have
have
not.
I love it.
This is like
this would be a Pat movie.
This is George Clooney, and it's a heist, right? During the Gulf
George
War.
Clooney, Mark Wahlberg,
and Ice-T.
That's right.
Ice Cube, not Ice-T. Ice Cube.
Right, Cube, tea, whatever.
Yeah, whichever one. Iced coffee. No, it's a lot of fun. Like they find that there is this Kuwaiti gold that was stolen by the Iraqis, and so their plan is to kind of go off on their own and to steal the gold for themselves. But as they go along, they kind of get into these situations where they could be helping others, and they have a dilemma as whether or not to continue to go for the Kuwaiti gold or help people that need help, and things go from there, and things get crazy. But yeah, I think this would be a Pat movie.
All right.
Yeah.
I think this would be one you'd like.
We'll put it on the list. Put it on the list. Yeah, I've cool. I've been thinking, I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll say this movie. And then I'm like, well, what about these other 10? I've just got a list, of movies. Right. So I got no one for you, buddy.
Okay. Nah, that's all right. Bo, you said you might have some others that just in case that you mentioned. Did we mention them yet?
So no, we haven't. Lord of War.
Oh yeah.
Is a great one.
Is that the Nicolas Cage where he's the gun runner?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Ugh. Yeah.
You've seen it.
Yeah. Have you seen I'm cutting across you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Go ahead, man. Sorry about that.
No, go ahead. You're good.
I was just going to say I kind of hadn't seen any of the more contemporary ones, but have you seen the Charlton Heston or not Charlton Heston, Clint Eastwood, the one he did about what's his name? Kyle, the Navy SEAL, the sniper, American sniper.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
Is it Chris Kyle? Was that his name?
Sounds right.
I think so, yeah.
And then the Mark Wahlberg one about Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor.
I have not seen that one yet.
Those are pretty. Those are pretty.
American Sniper was very good.
Those are more recent. Obviously talking about wars that are going on right now.
All right. Question number 2. Which movie of the Oliver Stone movies that we've talked about so far on the podcast, between his 2 Vietnam movies we've done so far, which one do you like better? This one, Born on the 4th of July, or Platoon?
I think I like Platoon better.
Okay.
But I'm not as sure why. But when you sent the text of the 2 A/B choice, that's what I had.
Okay.
Yeah, the question kind of presents a conundrum for me because it's like, enjoy in quotes. But, this one I find interesting because it portrays, this portrays the after you've come home aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And also gets into the historical thing with after you've come home and a soldier coming home during that Vietnam era. Yep. And that's, so I don't want to say this movie gets the nod, but I guess that's where this one kind of stands out, is it kind of it shows something that a number of other war pictures don't.
That's exactly the same reason I went for this one too. Was I figured, there's a lot of war movies out there that will show you, what's going on in the war. We've watched Full Metal Jacket, we've watched Hamburger Hill, we've watched Platoon, and then we've watched this one, and that's why I think I picked this one, just because it's different. Like I'm getting something from this movie that I did not get from those other movies, or that you don't tend to get, I feel like, from a lot of war movies.
Right.
All right. Question number 3. Favorite performance where an actor has to play someone with a disability?
This was tougher than I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But the first one that popped into my head was Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump.
Yep.
The second one I'll hold on to so I don't steal somebody's, and we'll see what we got.
Okay.
I'm just going to go with the first thing that came to mind is one we did earlier this year with was My Left Foot.
Mm-hmm.
Solid.
It was, yeah. Daniel Day-Lewis, right? Yeah. Wow, he really did a pretty amazing job. So,
well, Pat, you and I are kind of firing on on the same cylinders here because that's mine too.
Okay, sorry about that, man.
No.
For the record, I almost said, John, why don't you tell me what you think first? You know, I should have let you. I should have let you go.
That's fine. No, I made a list of some other movies too. And I tried to list off and was like, okay, well, what movies off the top of my head, without Googling anything, like what are some movies that I know that I've seen that I enjoy that someone has either whether it's mental, physical, some kind of disability, and that the actor just did a great job portraying that, or like where you forgot that this actor was not disabled, was not differently abled in real life. And, I went with some of the ones that are a little bit more like, well, okay, that's a bit of a stretch, but originally I wrote down like Rogue One, because the Chirrut Imwe in Rogue One.
There you go.
So I wrote that one down.
Yeah.
I don't think that's cheating, but that's it's Rogue One. I'm always going to mention Rogue One.
Yeah.
And then I wrote down a few others. I wrote down Charlie, the one that's based on Flowers for Algernon. If you guys have ever read that short story, I think it was a short story. That one from, I think it was either the 60s or 70s. That one came out. But then as I went through I wrote down Rear Window, but as I went through my list, I kept coming back to just when we watched that movie earlier this year, I completely just was so immersed in that movie and that character that I forgot that Daniel Day-Lewis is not differently abled. He did such a good job with that I really thought that was him and that he had that disability.
Here, you know what? I'm gonna throw another one out there. The King's Speech.
Yeah.
There, just to get another movie mentioned. I sure thought that was a pretty fantastic movie.
Yeah. Bo, you said you had some other ones that you had mentioned?
Just one in this one. And unfortunately, I had to tune out for a second. I was checking on a noise I heard around the corner. Thought somebody had fallen.
Oh.
But so did anyone mention Theory of Everything?
No. Is that the Eddie Redmayne?
Yep.
Yeah.
Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
No, actually, I haven't seen that movie yet.
Oh, good one.
More to add to the list.
Very, very, very good.
Okay. Yeah, some of the others that were on my list, I had Scent of a Woman. Had Rain Man. Just because I love that movie, Brad Pitt in 12 Monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was kind of my short list of stuff I had written down.
Yeah, Scent of a Woman. How did I forget about that?
That's a good one. I like that one. All right, number 4, favorite 4th of July memory. Mine is kind of quick because I say that and then I'm going to talk for like 20 minutes. Because that's what we do. Up until recently, I don't really have too many what I'd call specific 4th of July memories because every year now, my mother-in-law has a huge 4th of July party at her house. And that's our thing. Like that's what we do on 4th of July is we have the party and then we're so exhausted by the end of the party, we just go home and kind of crash at home. So we don't really ever go out and watch any fireworks. We tend to watch them on TV because we're all exhausted by the end of the day. And we watch the PBS does the Capitol 4th telecast that they do. And sometimes we'll watch the Macy's one in New York or the Chicago stuff. But we haven't really gone out to actually see any fireworks like in person. But growing up, some of my favorite memories growing up are there was a little town in Southwest Missouri that we'd go to. It's called Shell Knob. And they had this bridge that kind of ran right through the middle of town. And it was out over a lake. And these are some of the same lakes that are kind of shared by Branson and that area out there, kind of Lake of the Ozarks type area. And what they would do is everybody would go and they'd kind of park their cars really close to the bridge. And they would, I don't remember if it was from the bridge itself or if it was on a barge that was in the middle of the lake, and they would shoot the fireworks off from there. And that was just a really fun. And I had some relatives that had a cabin on the lake. So sometimes we'd go to the cabin and, sit out on the back deck and watch the fireworks there. When I was a little kid, my grandparents' house, they lived at a house that was surrounded by farmland. And so, we'd just go buy a bunch of fireworks and because in Missouri it was legal. So you go buy a bunch of fireworks and, we'd shoot them off in the backyard on 4th of July. And I was telling the kids earlier, because we've never bought, obviously they're not legal in Illinois, so we've never bought any fireworks here. But my favorite firework was the little tanks. You guys ever
love the tanks?
Where you light the tank and then the sparks would kind of shoot the tank forward, and it would roll forward maybe about 6 inches to a foot, and then it would start sparking out of the front.
Yeah.
Of the tank. Yeah. That was always my favorite firework, and that was my favorite thing to light up and shoot off on 4th of July. But, other than those memories as kids, recently it's the 4th of July party that we have every year. And we had one a few years ago. We were kind of reminiscing about that when I shared the 5 questions with the family tonight over dinner. And there was one year where it was just crazy hot outside, and somebody brought water balloons, and it turned into just fun chaos.
Cool.
But so that's mine.
Cool. Bo, what about your 4th of July?
I'm sort of like John. I don't have any like crazy memories about the 4th of July. But just, the whole tradition thing, going out to the parade and cooking out and hanging out with family, but no, I can't remember one that stands out, It's weird. Yeah. I feel like I should, and maybe it's because there's always something to do, I don't know.
Got it. Well, I've got 2. And I love what you guys are saying, because it just, hearing that about, like you said, the traditions and the stories and the firecracker, because it just warms my heart, because it just makes me think of family and all the different things that have happened. And as we grow, and like Tammy and I are married, so now there's different family traditions coming together, and it's just cool. I've got 2 that stand out. One was a number of years ago when when we'd go see the fireworks, we always would get in close. Okay, we would get in danger close to the fireworks, and it would be
somehow that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and my dad would always, we would head down, and my dad was and the town right by where I grew up, right over. We were able to. They'd fire them off on the golf course, the Buffalo Grove golf course, and we would get in as close as they would let you get in. And there were a number of people, and we'd stay off the greens, but we were camped out on the golf course there. And it was a humid night. It was hot and humid, and it was one of those that when the sun went down, it was still 91 degrees and 600% humidity. Mm-hmm. And so the fireworks go off. And then all of a sudden, it was just like, wow, those things are pretty close. And then the big ones with the streamers, that come way out, you realize that they were coming way out and landing on the ground. And then all of a sudden you felt like this dusty stuff, suddenly you were covered with this, and it was like, what? And it's like, oh, it's the sulfur from the fireworks going off. And then as they would go off, you realize that there were little flaming bits of the rockets kind of drifting down. And as I was processing all this and the fireworks were going off, and it was loud and it was big. All of a sudden I felt something sort of like someone 5-starred me on my back. It wasn't quite that hard, but I felt like something fell on me, and I turned around like, who tapped me on my shoulder? And I realized it was a piece of one of the rockets that was on fire. And as everything was so humid that everything was like landing on the ground, we were like in the fireworks. And so that was a pretty exciting year. And yeah, we got home, we were covered with all the powder or whatever they put in those things. And yeah, we all survived, and it was loud and it was bright, and there were, bits and pieces of firework falling down upon us. So that was an exciting time. And so I'd say that memory, and then I'm going to say the second, and I'm really sorry if this is too on the nose, but I got to be honest, this year, Stranger Things Season 3 coming out on the 4th of July. Pat's alarm went off at 1:55 a.m., and I rolled over and pulled the phone out, and at 2 a.m. I was hitting play on season it was 2 a.m., right? Or 3 or whatever it was. I had it set 2 a.m. I was hitting play. And I'm going to go on the podcast to say thank you guys so much for making sure that I watch that show. Because I know I'm like, I don't like scary things. I don't know, guys. And they're like, Pat, it's not, I think you'll like it. I think you'll like it. And this was definitely fun, because I could not wait for 2 a.m. on the 4th of July, 2019 to check out the 3rd season of Stranger Things. So I'd have to say,
that is a dedication that I don't even have.
Well, I don't know about that. I think we're all pretty dedicated in our own way. But I held out like, I don't know if this is my thing. And then I think I watched both seasons, 1 and 2, over Thanksgiving a couple of years ago. Like literally, I watched season 1 the night before into the morning of Thanksgiving, and then watched season 2 the afternoon into the morning after Thanksgiving, and was just like, this is the greatest thing ever. And then this one was the same. So I would say those are my 4th of July memories. But yeah, Stranger Things 3 has to be up there.
Very nice.
Nice. All right, final question. If you had to join a branch of the military, which one would you sign up for?
For me, it would probably be the Navy.
Okay.
Any particular reason, or?
I don't really fancy myself crawling through sand or the jungle. And I feel like I could do a submarine. Like, I think that'd be cool. Like, I think that's why, really.
Got it. What about yourself, John?
Well, and I'm the one that made up the questions. This was kind
you
of
would think the guy who made up the question would have an answer.
Yeah, I know.
With you.
Yeah. Well, as I'm thinking about this one, I mean, I'm not. I know I've shared this before. I'm not necessarily an anti-war person. I don't think I'd call myself a strict pacifist. That's not me. But there's a time and a place where war is a necessary evil. I'll call it that. But when I was thinking about this, I'm like, what would if I had to sign up for something, if I was drafted, or if I had to go in for something, my joking answer that I wrote down was the Space Force.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because I was like, I don't know, it's got space and force in the title, so let's sign up for that one. All I have to do is Space Force. All I have to do is shoot down satellites. So, however, like my one absolute nightmare is being lost in space in zero gravity and just floating. So that would not work out well.
Right.
I also don't swim well, so I'm not sure the Navy would be a great idea. My eyesight is not great, so I don't think that I could be in the Air Force. But I also don't really want to shoot anybody, so I don't think the Marines and the Army are good spots for me either. So I think I probably would have to go. Ultimately, I'd probably have to go Navy, because I feel like Navy. Like I'm not the kind of person that would want to be in a combat role. Like a direct combat role where I'm, seeing the other person in front of me, and I have to dispatch them while being able to see them. So I think that for me, it would have to be something like the Navy. But I also don't swim well. So, but as I have been told in the past, apparently there are many people in the Navy that don't swim well.
So no, you're not going to be like flying drones for the Air Force or any of that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, I see if that's an option. I mean, I guess I could, but yeah, I guess that's an option too. Although I did watch the what was the not Jack Reacher, what was the one they just did on Amazon Prime?
Oh,
is it John Grisham novels? Oh man.
John
Krasinski was the actor. Jack Ryan, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, is that any good?
It was good. Yeah. There was an episode though where a drone operator, like, I don't know if PTSD is the right word for kind of what he goes through, but he realizes something that he's done or people that he's attacked with the drones. And like, even there, I'm like, this guy goes through some psychological stuff, even just being a drone operator in the back of a truck. But yeah, so maybe I could do that too. Maybe if it's reconnaissance drones. We'll put it this way. I don't want to kill anybody. So if there's a role if there's a place that I could go and a role that I could take that is something where I don't end up killing anyone, then whatever branch of the military that is, put me there. I'll do reconnaissance. I'll do whatever. So wherever the most appropriate place for that is.
But not just, but not the swimming. Like you wouldn't be like a Coast Guard rescue. What do they call those guys that jump out of the helicopters that swim up to?
No. You'd have to rescue me if I jumped out of a helicopter.
Did you see that? That what was it? The Guardian, Kevin Costner. I don't know where the critics fall on that whole movie, but boy, I enjoyed it. But yeah, I tell you, man, seeing some of those scenes, that was pretty intense.
No. When Nora was, gosh, how old was she? She's maybe 4 or 5. She got a little overeager and dove into a swimming pool before she was really quite ready to do it. And then I jumped in after her, and I didn't really do such a great job of rescuing her because I myself am also like bobbing up and down. I'm like, okay, hold on, we got to get to the side of the pool here, and so no, I would not be like the Coast Guard rescue people. You'd have to rescue me.
Yeah, but you still jumped in for your daughter without hesitation, man. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's gonna do it for our 5 questions. Did I get everybody's? I think I got everybody's. Did I get yours, Pat?
No,
I didn't get yours.
Yeah, and I
got the best answer out of all of us. I didn't get his answer.
Well, I don't know about that. And I'll cycle back to my earlier conversation. It's very easy to sit here and be sitting here in my rocking chair, just kind of like in the podcast saying, talking about what I could do or couldn't do and all that. But I guess I would have to echo your comments, guys, and say the U.S. Navy. And I'll just say that my grandfather and father both served in the Navy. So growing up, that was kind of, one of the things that was prevalent, in growing up, talking about it. And, I guess if you probably would have asked me, even up going into high school, what I was going to do after high school, it probably would have told you I'm going into the U.S. Navy. But I was always I was fascinated by submarines, fascinated by the surface warfare, destroyers and cruisers and all that kind of thing. But I'll be really honest with you, and if I would, I'm very fascinated by like the Navy SEALs, and I like I said, I'm just going to preface this by saying it's very easy to just sit here and say, oh, I'd be able to do this or that and the other thing, but I guess I would just be curious to see if I could, if I could do that training and be that and do that in reading about that and talking with people that have and so forth. And so, yeah, but I would say U.S. Navy. And like I said, my grandfather, my father, my cousin is currently serving. My first boss was career Navy. My first principal was. So anyways, I guess that's what I would say.
Okay. Nice.
And like anybody growing up in the 80s, man, if flying F-14 Tomcats off an aircraft carrier, I mean, barring that, but yeah.
There was a movie that we watched with my family when I was in Texas. One of the nights they put on a like different movie every night. They put it on when everybody was kind of late and everybody was just kind of getting ready for bed. And one of the movies we watched was called the title on, was it Amazon Prime or I forget where it was called The Command, but the other title of the movie is Kursk, and it's about the accident that happened.
Yeah.
Was that 2001? 2001. I remember because I helped kind of write a story on it for the college newspaper when it happened. But it was the explosion that happens on the Russian nuclear sub.
Right.
And, all the men are trapped in there, and other international aid is trying to help out, but the Russian officials are not allowing them to do it. Not a bad movie. It wasn't, I didn't know what to expect going into it. It didn't look like it had too many, bigger name actors. But pretty decent movie.
Nice.
Yeah.
The other one, while I'm talking about that real quick, the other ones I saw, was it called The Five? So we had a Russian theme going on. Was it called The Five Russians? Might have been The Five Russians. It was a documentary about
the 5 Russians.
Yes, about the 5 Russians. Thank you. I'm going to keep the podcast family friendly and just say thank you, Bo.
Jeez.
Hey, man. Summertime. It's after 9:30. Game on.
Yeah, that's fine. No, it's a documentary about the Detroit Red Wings.
Sure. Yeah.
And kind of how they got that team together and won the Stanley Cup and all that. Really, really good documentary. And then the third movie that we watched
sounds super cool, actually.
It was. Yeah.
Check that out.
If you can find it, it's really good.
Yeah.
And then the third one we watched was a movie called Sorry to Bother You.
Okay.
I don't know how to describe this movie.
Okay, now I'm even more interested.
Now you need to go see it. This movie is, and the family that I was there watching it with, of the cousins that were there, we had a range of ages from like mid-20s all the way up to my aunt and uncle that were there, and they kind of left early. My aunt left early, and she's like, "Nope, I'm done. I'm not watching this anymore." My uncle sat through it all, but when the movie ended, he immediately stood up when the credit starts, and he looked at his youngest son and said, I won't repeat exactly what he said, but he said, "I can't believe you made me watch this movie." And he walked out. And then the rest of us that were sitting there were like, I think I liked it, but I'm not sure. So the premise of the movie is you have this black man who works in a call center, like he's working as a telemarketer kind of thing. And he doesn't sell anything. Like customers think of him as being, very off-putting, and they don't like his voice and they don't like the way he talks. And so he decides to adopt a white voice when he makes his phone calls, and he starts selling things like crazy. So then some of the other telemarketers start doing the same thing, and those people who do start making more money, and they get moved up into like the elite group. And you think that ultimately you kind of think that this movie is going to go the route of the people who are left in the kind of lower call center are going to start unionizing, and that looks like they're going to start trying to fight back against the people who have all the money and the power, and they're not being paid a living wage and all this other stuff. And this is a comedy movie, so it's kind of a social commentary, but also a comedy. And then that's about the first, let's say 80% of the movie. The last 20% of the movie, you will sit there and just go, what the heck am I watching? Because it takes a crazy, surreal turn. And all of a sudden, the movie is not about people trying to fight for better wages anymore. It gets weird, but in kind of a fun way.
Okay.
So that's all I'll say. If you're just looking for something to watch and you are not sure what to watch and you're just like, hey, I'm up for anything, then definitely give this one a try. I think you will definitely think at least parts of this are funny. And when the movie takes that turn, you'll either sit there and go, oh, this is great, or you'll sit there and go, I hate John. Now I need to find him and beat the crap out of him.
Well, we did get you, to watch The Room. So
this is nowhere near as bad as The Room.
Okay.
Like, this is actually a good movie, good actors,
Okay.
So it's called Sorry to Bother You.
Got it.
It just came out last year. All right. So I think that's going to do it for Born on the 4th of July this time. So we're going to be back next time with Look Who's Talking. So a slight shift in terms of our movies here. But we'll be back here with that one next time. So thank you, Bo Lovefest, and thank you, Pat.
Thank you, John.
All right. We'll be back here next week with Look Who's Talking. In the meantime, be excellent to each other. Go watch some good movies, and we'll see you back here next week.